GW Solutions is pleased to present the results of the study of the Englishman River and its aquifers. This work started in 2009 and was done for the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society. It is presented in a series of slides, and this is part 1 of the presentation. So what was known about the aquifers in the Englishman River watersheds when we started that study? The BC Ministry of Environment operates a web-based map site called the BC Water Atlas, where information on aquifers is available. However, the information is very limited. It tells you, as shown on this map for the study area, the footprints of aquifers and if they are in bedrock or in overburdened aquifers such as sand and gravel aquifers. It does not provide information on the depth, the thickness of the aquifer, or how the groundwater move in the aquifer. So when we started the study, very little was known about the flux of groundwater near the Englishman River and the role played by the aquifers in supplying water to the river, in particular during the period of low flows. Also, the mapping was done based on existing well logs and subsurface information in order to create the footprints shown on the BC Water Atlas. So the absence of aquifers, as for the area outlined in red, reflects more an absence of data than an absence of aquifers. So one of the main objectives of the study was to update the knowledge about the aquifers along the Englishman River and to characterize the dynamic, the flux of groundwater between the aquifers and the river. The RDN has created a section focusing on water in their website. So far, it shows maps and provides access to reports about studies completed in the RDN. It refers to the same aquifers as listed by the Ministry of Environment, as seen on this slide. It lacks information describing the movement of water in the watershed and simple illustrations describing the movement of water at surface and in the subsurface through the aquifers. One of the objectives of our study was to fill that gap. So we chose to identify where groundwater was moving in the subsurface and how it interacts with the Englishman River. We also wanted to create images that illustrate the dynamic between the aquifers and the river, and the connection between the land and its recharge areas, the groundwater movement, and the groundwater fluxes to the river. We have achieved these objectives, and the results are presented in part 2 and part 4 of this series of presentation. We have studied the lower part of the watershed, north of the yellow line, because we focused on the groundwater movement in the sand and gravel aquifers, and this is where they are present. This is also the area where aquifers sustain extremely valuable salmon habitat. The most upstream boundary of the study area is the Englishman River Falls, which represent a barrier to fish migration in this river. What were the questions that we wanted to answer when we started the study? We wanted to identify where the aquifers were present near the Englishman River. We wanted to understand if the Englishman River was providing water to the aquifers, or on the contrary, if the aquifers were providing water to the Englishman River, and also when that was taking place in the year. We wanted to understand if the aquifers had a regulating role on the Englishman River. In particular, if they provided an important part of the low flow in the summer, if they were controlling the temperature of the Englishman River and other parameters. We also wanted to know if activities conducted by human at surface were having an impact and could have an impact on this dynamic between the Englishman River and its aquifers. So where are the aquifers near the Englishman River? One of the key tools to understand aquifers, their presence, their extent, the level of the water table, etc., is to draw cross sections. So many cross sections were drawn for the study area. They are indicated with green lines, and I am going to focus on two of them indicated by the red line and the yellow line. The first cross section is oriented south to north and is approximately 8 kilometers long. The distance is presented at the bottom of the slides with the distance indicated in meters. The y-axis presents the elevation in meters above sea level. As you can see, the Y scale is exaggerated in order to really show the thickness of the deposits. We are presenting a simplified version of the lithology, showing the bedrock in light gray. Then we have the permeable material, the aquifers, represented with the light blue. And we have the low permeability material, the clay, the silt, and the till in dark gray. An important information when we draw cross sections is to assess the shape and the slope of the water table. The blue line represents the observed water table when the wells were drilled and reported on the driller's logs. The shape of the water table is very important because it gives information on the direction with which the groundwater moves into the ground, as indicated by the arrows. The second cross-section is an east to west cross-section, and it presents the typical sequence of material that we have on the east coast of Vancouver Island. So from surface to depth, we first have thick till layers, then we have our sand and gravel aquifers above a basal till layer over bedrock. So the aquifer is typically 10 to 20 meter thick. We realize on this cross section the continuity of the aquifer from left to right. We also can observe a dip in the bedrock with buried valleys observed at distance between 5 and 6 kilometers. At the bottom of this deep valley we have a low aquifer, a deep aquifer. We also see on the cross section the slope of the water table going from high level on the left side to a low level corresponding to the Englishman River. So the Englishman River acts as a drain receiving groundwater. The cross section also presents what was observed in the drop of the water table over time. We have two monitoring wells located on the left side of the cross section, and these monitoring wells have presented drops of about 4 meters over the last 20 years. So this is significant information. A lot of information about the aquifers was gained and confirmed when we kayaked down the river on September 15th of 2011. This day was selected because it was when the river was flowing at a low flow of about 2 cubic meters per second, and after 3 weeks without rain. That was important because we wanted to make sure that any wet areas that we would observe on the left bank or the right bank of the river would be the result of groundwater seeping on the slopes and not the result of wet zones due to recent rains. This is a picture of the right bank of the Englishman River between kilometer 11.4 and 11.5. We clearly observe a gray layer of TL. Above that we have 2 to 3 meters thick of a sandy gravelly layer with actually cobbles present in that layer. Where was that picture taken? The yellow arrow indicates where the picture was taken, and it was taken at 11 kilometers. So we have identified the distance on this slide, starting at the foreshore at 0 kilometer and going all the way to the Englishman River Falls at 16 kilometers. The picture also shows the location of the South Englishman River and Morrison Creek. We are now zooming on a section of the right bank of the river. And what can we observe? This picture was taken 3 weeks after the last rain. And look at the grass just at the top of the TL. It's green, it's lush, so it means it's receiving water. It means that water is present at the bottom of this sandy and gravelly layer that we have overlaying the TL. This sandy gravelly layer is an aquifer, so it's present on the right bank and it contains water and it provides water to the Englishman River. The next picture was taken of the left bank at 12.5 kilometers. So look at that. We have quite a thick overburden. On is standing by the river. On is quite a tall guy. So we have over 20 meters of sand and gravel. The lower section of the deposit is darker, is wet, so there is water moving through this sandy unit and discharging to the Englishman River. The riverbed at kilometer 7, just past the hydro line, is very wide with flat banks and very gravelly and very cobbly material covering the riverbed. The next picture is taken at kilometer 5, where we have the bend in the river. So look, the river is clearly flowing on bedrock, and bedrock is controlling the location of the river. The last picture of the Englishman River is taken 2 kilometers upstream from the foreshore and illustrates how the Englishman River looks like at lower elevation. So we have relatively wide river with relatively flat banks and definitely the presence of very coarse and permeable material, gravel and sand and cobbles in the riverbed and along its banks. During this study, the community played a very important role. volunteers completed several monitoring events and used field equipment to measure the temperature, the pH, the electrical conductivity, and the total dissolved solids of the water of the river. This was done under high and low water level conditions and at many locations, as shown by the red stars. Why was this done? Because rainwater and groundwater have very different characteristics. For example, groundwater has a constant temperature all year long, around 10 degrees C. So a reduction of temperature observed in the river in the summer could be interpreted as associated with a flux of groundwater discharging to the river. So this is very important information, and I'm very glad that the community was involved and was able to do that. Thank you very much to them. So here we are. This map illustrates the updated footprints of the sand and gravel aquifers connected to the Englishman River. In particular, we have identified and mapped aquifers that had not been identified in the past. Along the right bank of the river, between kilometer 16 and 10, we have a shallow sand and gravel aquifer. We have a series of 3 sandwiched aquifers in contact with the main stem of the Englishman River, between its confluence with the South Englishman River near kilometer 9 and the river bend at kilometer 5. We also have a shallow aquifer located along the left bank at the location of the regional park and farmland, and this aquifer plays an important role in providing groundwater to the river and sustaining fish habitat. This is discussed and illustrated with more details in part 4. One unit that also plays a role in storing and releasing water is made of the alluvium and corrovium present along the riverbed. And so this is usually coarse material along the riverbed and at the base of the banks, material which has been deposited by the river or resulting from the sloughing of the banks. So you can imagine that during the wintertime when the river is high, it provides water to the voids of this unit, and as the water level drops in the summer and early falls, then this unit is releasing water back to the river, so it's providing water.